CBS Television presents a special report on Sputnik 1, the Soviet space satellite.
October 4th, 1957. The Soviet Union has successfully launched Sputnik 1, the world's first artificial satellite. The story begins in 1952, when the International Council of Scientific Unions decided to establish July 1st, 1957 to December 31st, 1958 as the International Geophysical Year, because the scientists knew that the cycles of solar activity would be at a high point then. In October 1954, the Council adopted a resolution calling for artificial satellites to be launched during the IGY to map the Earth's surface. The USA and the Soviet Union have been rivals for years now, since the Soviets first stole our nuclear weapon plans. Now it seems as if the USSR is gaining ground ahead.
Well, Dr. Newell, what about the vital question that everybody is thinking about? Why and how did the Russians beat us to the draw?
Well, in answer to that, I'd like to say a few introductory words first. When we began our program, the planners and the engineers and the scientists drew up a schedule for themselves which consisted of a number of logical engineering steps to lead to the final objective. Now, this schedule placed them in a race with time because they had to get the satellite up during IGY. And naturally, we can assume that the Soviets did the same thing, and they were in a race with time also with the same deadline. It therefore seems quite reasonable that one or the other would get a satellite up first. It would, in fact, be a very remarkable coincidence if both of them went up on the same day at the same time.
Was it a surprise to you that they got there first?
Well, it was something of a surprise, and naturally, since this generates a certain amount of scientific rivalry, something of a disappointment to us, but this does not lessen our admiration of what the Soviets have done.
I am standing here on the site of Sputnik's launch. This momentous occasion, all thanks to Sergei Korolev, the lead researcher for the Soviet space program. Mr. Korolev, what can you tell the viewers about their satellite?
This satellite is like nothing we have ever built. Sputnik is about as big as a beach ball and weighs 183.9 pounds. It can travel around the Earth in 98 minutes in its elliptical orbit.
B for the USSR.
This marks a new era in Soviet history, one in which the Soviets get to show their intelligence and capabilities in science and technology. There's nothing like communism to bring about these achievements.
Thank you so much, Mr. Korolev, for your insight into this launch and into the Soviet space program. We're done.
As to the Soviet satellite, we congratulate Soviet scientists upon putting a satellite into orbit. The United States satellite program has been designed from its inception for maximum results in scientific research. The scheduling of this program has been described to and closely coordinated with the International Geophysical Year scientists of all countries. As a result of passing full information on our project to the scientists of the world, immediate tracking of the United States satellite will be possible, and the world's scientists will know at once its orbit and the appropriate times for observation.
November 3rd, 1957. The USSR has launched Sputnik 2, carrying a dog named Laika.
So how do you feel about the Soviets getting life into space?
The real question is, what have those Americans been doing all this time? I mean, those Soviets could be dropping their missiles any time now. Thankfully, the government has created public figures like Bert the Turtle to keep my children safe.
That's right. So what do you think that the United States should do to beat those Soviets in this so-called space race?
Well, I think we should get to the sun. Our scientists should get working to squash those Soviets before they squash us.
And the next shot will be the Vanguard going aloft. It is hoped to carry the first U.S. satellite into orbit in outer space.
The U.S. scientists realize the world is watching and waiting. And the Americans who swept this one out at Cape Canaveral know their fledgling is on the spot.
Propaganda defeat for this country.
January 31st, 1958. The United States has successfully launched Explorer 1.
President Eisenhower, is it true that Explorer 1 is orbiting our Earth at this very moment?
That is correct. We have launched our first satellite into space, and it is making its journey around the Earth to discover the secrets of our planet.
Is it true that the Soviets may be able to sabotage our plans with their own?
We will make sure that no plan of ours is interrupted. In order to strengthen our scientific endeavors, we are planning to create the National Aeronautics and Space Administration via the National Aeronautics and Space Act. This will ensure more space exploration successes in the future. We are always keeping in mind the safety of the American people. Da, 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 da.
October 1st, 1958. The National Aeronautics and Space Act, passed by Congress in July, has created the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA, and the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, NACA, and other government organizations. September 2nd, 1958. The National Defense Education Act, NDEA, has been signed into law, providing funding to United States educational institutions at all levels. It allocates funds for upgrading funds in the sciences, foreign language, guidance services, and teaching innovation.
July 16th, 1969. The Americans have landed on the moon. Allegedly, astronauts Neil Armstrong, Edwin Aldrin, and Michael Collins have set foot for the first time on the celestial body.
What do you have to say about the just failed lunar launch?
We will not give up hope. The Soviet Union is clearly better than the United States in terms of scientific achievements and technology, but we may just have to give the win to the US for the space race.
Will we be able to recover from our loss?
Of course, this is only one bump in the road. Workers of the world unite to fight for our beautiful Soviet Union.